So in this recording, I'm going to show you how we can use the smart process automation tools to create a new entity inside the CRM so that we can store information that is going to be relevant to our requirements. Now, first of all, you access the smart process automation by going to the CRM in the left-hand menu and then clicking in smart process automation in the top menu. If you don't see it here, you will see it in the drop-down menu under More. Now, in today's scenario, we're going to create an employees module. The employees module will allow us to store specific information about the employees of the business. And what we can do with that information is we can restrict it so that only the HR department can access this key information. Before we actually create it, I'm going to show you what the end goal is. So if you click into the Employees Smart Process Automation, you'll be able to see that we've created a set of fields in a list view here. Now, if I click on Add, we'll be able to see the custom fields that have been created for the HR team to fill out. So I can click on each field and fill out the relevant data in here. Put a date in, put an email in. So we're just collecting information about existing employees. Social security number. We can upload an example driving license. We can select a salary bracket here, and I can say that they're in the marketing department. I can click on Save, and that information will be stored on the left-hand side of the screen. We can obviously then write comments. I can even send an email to the employee. I can book meetings with the employee, and I can really secure this data to ensure that it's only seen by the correct people. Now, one important part of this is obviously the HR team need to have access to it. But we might also want the employee themselves to be able to have access to it. So in that case, what I can do is I can click on Select Field here, click on Responsible Person, and make the person who is essentially going to be a user on this system the same employee as the details you've collected. Okay? So for the security purposes, I can click on Settings in here, and then go to Permissions, click on Access Permissions, and then I can set up a new role on this right-hand side. So I can click on Add, and I could just call it, for example, HR role. And then in here, what we want, when we create a new smart process automation, we can see in here that we want the HR team to have full access to the employees SBA. Then I can assign that role to the HR department and HR role. Therefore, the HR department will have full access to the new employee smart process automation. What I could then do is, let's say, for example, we have another role for our employees. So I'll click into Sales, and you'll be able to see the role for the sales. Now, rather than seeing employees all, we want to set that to personal. We won't allow them to add, and we don't want them to update their own record, neither do we want them to delete it. So you can see having this set as personal means that the user on the system will only be able to see their own employee record that they are responsible for. Once I've clicked on that, click on Save, and then I can assign this. I've got that already, so employees up at the top here. My company employees will assign the user role. And that's how we would do it. So we would have All our employees have personal access to their own employee record within the smart process automation that has been set up, and the HR department would have access to all of them. So hopefully you can see how this might be quite useful to use, not just for storing employee information, but to store other kinds of processes that you might require. We've seen this the smart process automation used as a help desk. We've seen it used as an onboarding process. So there are many uses for the smart process automation. Now let's go back to the smart process automation tool here, and let's start from the beginning of how we created this. So you can see in here we have the employees. Now if I want to add a new one, I'll just call this employees 2 as an example. We have 3 options on here: essentials only, all options selected, empty SPA. All that those options do when you click on them is they pre-select the SPA components on this page here. Now you can see that we can enable pipelines and sales funnels, pretty much like what is available inside the deals entity within the CRM. We have stages and Kanban, so again, what we can see usually in leads and in deals. We have the ability to have automation rules and triggers, again, what we can see usually in leads and in deals. And we have the workflow business process tool that we can enable too. So these options really give you the power to create your own entity inside the CRM. I'm going to use the workflow designer, and I'm going to call this our employees too, just to show you how I set up the original. What we then can do is we can click on here and bind it to other areas of the CRM. So company details, we can use the source field from the leads that's pre-populated, the customer, so we can bind it to a contact inside the CRM, start and end date, and observers. So we can bring in some useful fields from elsewhere inside the CRM. In our case, I'm not going to do that because we don't really need to bind our employee SPA to any other entity inside the CRM. I can click on here and I can bind it also to leads, to deals, and I can also bind it to other SPAs as well. I'm going to create a second SPA after this one to be able to track certifications and qualifications and link it to our employee, which is going to be quite powerful. We can also link it to CRM entities, calendars. So if you were to create an event and you wanted to associate that calendar event with your employee SPA, you would select that. With regards to tasks and task templates, if you were creating tasks inside Bitrix and you wanted to be able to bind that task to your employee's SPA in this case, then you can do that too. If I want to add it to the left-hand menu, I can do. I can just click on Add, select the option to On, and then I can add it to this left-hand menu. In our case, I'm not going to do that. So once we've created it, the next step of organizing your smart process automation is going to be adding the data fields to your SPA. To do that, just click on the menu to the left-hand side, click on Field Settings here, and then we can start creating our SPA form. Now I'm just going to create a few simple fields to start off with. I won't create the full form that we would normally fill out, but I'm going to put first name, give it a name in here. Then what I'm going to do is obviously put last name as a string field. So a string allows you to put any numbers, spaces, and text. And then we have to give it an ID. The ID cannot have any spaces in it. We'll create a couple more fields in here. We'll create a date field, so the date of birth. And then we'll have a file upload field for our driving license. license. So hopefully you get an idea about how you can simply and quickly create your own entities within the CRM once I've created that. So I'll just create those 4 fields to start off with. Now what we want to do is we want to go into the Smart Process Automation and just organize the fields themselves. So if you click into Add, you can see here that it will give us the fields that we've created. Now I'm going to delete this section to start off with, and I'm going to rename this section Employee Contact Details. I'll create a new section, and then we'll just call this one Identification. And what I will do is drag that one down. So we're making a nice form for your HR team to be able to fill out. Furthermore, what I want to do is to have these fields always showing even if they're empty. And then what I can do is I can then fill it out. Now, because we're in the common form view here, every person that comes into here will be able to see the same layout as what you have sent. I'll add an example driving license in here. Click on Save, and therefore we will be able to see our new entry inside here. Now what we might see as well is because I deleted the name form out of, well I didn't delete it, I hid it out of the form. I want to actually automatically rename the name of this item and every item that we create the first and last name on here. Now to do that, because I enabled the Workflow Designer tool, we can click into Settings in the top menu. We can then click into Automation and Business Processes. And then what we can do, scroll to the bottom and you can see our employees too. So when we were setting up those SPA components, the only checkbox that I ticked was the ability to have a workflow. So I can click into Templates. I can then click into Add a new template. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a rule update name. When added, click Save. Then in this Business Process Designer tool, I'm going to click on Edit Element. And this is going to allow me to update any field that exists inside our employee to SPA. Update name, so I can select the field or I can select any other field that we've got inside our SPA. Then on the right hand side we click on the dots. If I scroll down I can access the fields that exist inside our SPA. So I'm going to automatically call it first name and last name. If I click on Save, then I click on Save again. And then if I go back to my employees too and just show you what that's done, is if I now go and click to add an additional employee, so if I now go Sam Smith and then add a date in here, and then again we'll just add the same driving license. But what we'll notice now, rather than it being called a bit of a random string, we now have it called Sam Smith, based on the business process that's run on creation, and therefore you can rename it to whatever you like. And that's quite a good process to do, even in the other entities in the CRM, whether you're in a lead or a deal. It allows you to have a consistent naming policy based on the item that you're creating. So hopefully you can see how useful this is going to be. I can take off these on here and then click into here. So furthermore, you can actually put permissions on individual fields, which can be quite useful. So in here, we might want this driving license field only to be accessible by specific people. So to do that, we click on the little gear icon on Configure. I click on here and I could make the individual people only have access to this field. And that's really going to be useful if you've got salary information that you might not want all of the HR team to be have access to, or if you've got social security numbers or so on and so forth. So it is quite powerful to be able to hide individual fields. You obviously saw how we could then include the responsible person field at the beginning of this session. I could make this now Sam Smith. I would have to find Sam in here, and then Sam would be able to see his own record within here. Now, that's how easy it is to create a smart process automation, and the employees example is just a simple example to show you. Now, what we might want to do to add a little bit more of power behind these smart process automations is bind two together. Now, that's really going to be useful if you want to track certain things such as training or any certifications that your employees need to do. So what I will do is I will add a new smart process automation. I will click on Essentials Only so I can show you what I'm going to select. And we'll call this Health and Safety Training. And what we'll do is we won't have a pipeline, but we will have stages. And we will have some automation on these stages as well. So we'll leave it as that. I don't need any of these particular fields in here, but I do want to bind it against our employees SPA that already exists. So if I now go to our employees 2.1, just to show you as an example of what I've just created, I select that and then I add linked items to the details form. And that's really important because I'll show you what this does now. Once I click on Save, that will create our health and safety training, SPA. But if I go into our employees 2, where we were a moment ago, what we should see now is when we go into an employee that already exists, we should now see our health and safety training tab at the top of the screen. And we do. And that's really handy because what we're going to do here is we're going to create new entries into the health and safety training and bind it to each employee. So that therefore allows us to hold individual records for training, for certifications, and a whole range of other items against this particular employee only. So we can track and be notified when their certification maybe expires. So let's go back to our smart process automation and let's go into our health and safety and click on field settings here. And then I'm only going to add a couple of examples in here. So we could say, we'll give this a string, training name, training name. Click on Save. Click on Create. We'll have certification as a file. Certificate. And then finally, we'll just have a date field for expiration. And then click on Save. So I'll just add those 3 fields. And obviously, again, you can add as many fields as you'd like to record against this particular one. So what I can do now is I can click into our health and safety just to show you that it does look a little bit different because I have added the Kanban and stages element to it. And what I'm going to do is time to renew, and we might want this as renewed. And finally, we'll call this training okay, time to renew, renewed, and then we can have it cycle once it's coming up to that particular expiration date. So what I want to do here, let's just have a look what the form fields look like. So in here we've got, I mean, we could use the name field in all honesty about the training title. Training. Let's just remove that one, I can delete it. Always try and make them look as nice as possible. Again, show always. What we might want to include on this is our employees too. So if we were to add the training directly from within this smart process automation, so if we were to come out of here and click on add, then I could add each training for each employee via this method. So we'll do it this way first. So if I click back onto add, and then I can say, call this health and safety 2022. I want to find our employees. So this gives me, because I've bound it to our employees to SPA, it gives me the entries. So you can see Sam Smith, the employee that I added. And I can add Sam's certification here. And I can add an expiration date. And let's just say that it's going to expire in October 31st. So if I now click save, that will then create that health and safety record inside. So I've got training okay at the minute. You can see all the details that I've stored. Now let's see what it looks like from our employees to SPA. So if I now click on Sam Smith, and then in here, you can see the record that is associated to it. And that's where it becomes really powerful, because you can create multiple smart process automations where you bind them to one entity, such as an employee. So it could be that you have multiple areas to track on each employee record, and you can do that by creating multiple SPAs and binding them to the main SPA that you're doing, so employees in our case. What I tend to do as well is I'd recommend just hiding the items that you don't need as well, to nicely make it look nice and only accessible for the items that you want to be able to see. And if we wanted to add a health and safety training the other way, then we would come into the employee in here, and I can click on health and safety training and add another record in here without any issues. So there's two ways of doing it. You can see if you do it directly from the employee SPA, then it automatically pre-populates this field. So if you are always going to do it via that method, then you could potentially just hide that field and no longer need it. Now the final part of this really is, because if you've enabled stages and automation, it might be that you want to be notified when that expiration date for that particular training is coming into play. So what we can do here is click on the automation rules, and in here we might want to click on add, click on for employee, change stage, and then we could time to renew. Let's have maybe a 2-week window. And then instead of running immediately, we can click in 5 minutes before created on date. Let's get the expiration date in here, change this from minutes to days and put 14 days. Click on select. What that's going to do is it will, when a new entry gets added onto the health and safety training, it arrives at training okay, and then it will look at that expiration date. And then it will wait until 14 days before that expiration date and move it and update it to time to renew here. So we could say, well, label it move to time to renew stage. And as you can imagine, what you can then do is you can click into add on here for employee. We can then have a look at maybe sending an internal notification. Click on the 3 dots to the right hand side. We could put in here, drag, training name, for, and then in here, we need to just find the employees to text. The expiration date is, and then again, we click on the 3 dots and get that expiration date in here. We can send that to whoever. We wouldn't generally send it to the recipient because that is going to be the person who is the actual employee themselves. So what's probably likely is that we go into the HR team and click on Katie, who's the head of HR, click on save, and then that will notify Katie for every person that is coming up 2 weeks before their training expiration date. And again, try and label it, so notify. Now, I mean, you could do that in a whole different number of ways. You could create tasks internally for being able to renew somebody's certification, which is probably the most common. You'll probably create a task in here, click on add for employee task, and then you would probably associate it to the HR work group as an example. But obviously what will also happen is in here, if we click on save and come out, all of these records will come into here and you'll be able to check this on a weekly basis if there are certifications that need to be up and coming. So that's really it. Hopefully you found that useful as a one potential use case to store employee information in the Smart Process Automation module inside the CRM, and also how you can create multiple Smart Process Automations and link them together. In this case, we're linking 2 Smart Process Automations together, the employees and the health and safety training that we're storing individual information on. I also showed you how you can obviously put permissions on each Smart Process Automation. So when you create one of these, it will appear in the CRM settings, into the permissions, into the access permissions. And again, if I went into our HR role that I created a little while ago, then you will be able to see, if I scroll down, you can then see health and safety training is now available to set permissions on as well. So always try and remember that, because obviously if you're storing important information, secure information, then the right people need to be able to access it, and obviously it needs to be restricted to those people. So if you've got any questions, put them in the comments below and we can answer them. But hopefully, as I say, you found that example of the Smart Process Automation useful.